Okay, so we're getting ready to swap the diffs over on the G, and I figured this would be a good time for me to explain axles, more specifically people breaking axles, because that kind of happens a lot on these cars. What I'm gonna say, I'm not saying is 100% correct and everybody else is wrong. Definitely not saying that, because I know there's gonna be people out there that say, well, I did this and that to my car and I've never broken an axle. Again, I'm generally speaking. Now there's two ways that these axles normally break. One is in the CV itself, and one is gonna be on the shaft. If you break an axle in the CV itself, that's usually one of two things: either too much shock or it doesn't have clearance. How does the clearance thing happen? If you actually do some research, you'll find out that when the suspension compressors pass a certain point on these cars, the axle gets compressed even closer together and gets rid of more clearance. And also when you layer on a drift alignment on top of that, which requires the wheels to be pulled in even more to zero out the camber, that's compressing that axle even more. So a lot of people think in that situation, I need an axle spacer, when you're actually going to just make it way worse with the axle spacer. So only time you should use one of those is if you're doing like a dual caliper bracket or whatever, which I am soon on this car. So now the other way of how axles break, which is at the shaft itself, that's almost always down to just pure shock from clutch kicks, clutch dumps, whatever you want to call it. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that every time I see people break axles, I ask them one thing, which is, are you running solid diff bushings? And the answer is almost always yes. Now, anytime you do a clutch kick, clutch dump, whatever you want to call it on any car, that is an insane amount of shock that has to travel down the driveline. And if you have a solid diff bushing, that bushing cannot absorb that kind of shock. So what is it going to do? It's either going to snap your differential stud, which happens a lot to people, or it's going to break your axle. On my cars, I've always ran poly diff bushings. Just go watch any of my POV videos. You'll see how aggressive I am with the clutch. Just watch my left foot, and I've never snapped an axle. So run a poly bushing here, which I already have installed on my subframe. Run poly here, and on my personal car, I'm actually going to go one step further. I'm going to go back to OEM diff ear bushings, because this car is a little bit heavier, so I want to try to take a little bit more shock out of it to transfer it onto the bushing so I don't snap anything. But yeah, again, let me know what you guys think. If you guys are snapping axles left and right, check your differential to hub axle length, and then see if you're running solid bushings. If you are running solid bushings, just go back to poly. Definitely not OEM, because those are trash, but poly, try it out and let me know how it goes.